band. Well, good morning again to everyone. Welcome to Discover Church, where our hope is that each and every person would encounter Jesus in a deeper way than they ever have before, because he is the one who transforms lives. And we welcome any guest today. We welcome our digital viewers as well. Thank you for joining us, each and every one of you. Thank you for taking time out on your Sunday. And if you are watching online, we would just ask that you might pop in a comment, just say hello to us. Someone would love to say hello back to you as well. Now I'm just going to invite up Pete to give us an update about the carpet squares, but as he does, I want to just encourage you all. Last week we gave a little promotion about our Christmas baskets that everyone can be a part of, and as you leave the building, there's actually one up near our welcome desk that you can have a bit of a look at. And the idea behind that is that over the month of November, people just buy different grocery items, and those baskets will go and bless different people in the community. And we were aiming for 30 baskets, but we have exceeded that because of your generosity. And not only your generosity, but also the generosity of our local community, some of the businesses as well. So I want to just highlight, like Big W and Kmart, they got behind the baskets and they've donated baskets. Audi has donated cash. We've had another business as well donate cellophane to wrap them all up and make them really beautiful, so that when they are given out to some families in need through us, a couple of the local schools and preschools, they will be a beautiful gift for a family to receive. And if you still want to be involved in this, please go to the welcome desk after the service, because I'm sure that there'll be a basket at some point for you to be able to physically contribute in that way. Or if you want to just donate cash, you can do a bank transfer. But if you go to the welcome desk and speak to those people after the service, they will be able to help you out. And congratulations to everyone, just for your generosity. When we give, we're not giving really to our community, we're actually giving to God, and he can do far more with our few dollars than what we could do ourselves.
Fantastic. On a similar note, I'm talking about carpet, of all things. Let's give a cheer for carpet. Now, we had a working bee a little while ago, and I got a few of the volunteers to do some spot cleaning of the carpet, and they said, "Man, I didn't realise there were so many stains." I said, "Yes, there's a lot, and we need an upgrade." But like the baskets, Leanne, we are banking on a team effort, and so far we're doing really, really well. Look at that. So we're over 7,000. Our aim is about 11, but we're working behind the scenes, our part, to see if we can get that down a little bit to make it a bit more affordable. But we would love for you, and for those that have given the 7, thank you very, very much. We would just love to be able to come in and walk on some really nice carpet, something along those lines, rather than the faded blue, yucky, not very cushiony bits. So imagine that under your feet with your name on the back of them, and we can just get this done as a DIY. So as a church, we're budgeting for a bit of a loss again this year, so we can't just chip in and do whatever we need to do. So we're really banking on the team effort, the community, to get behind this. We've got a little bit to go, so if you've forgotten or haven't, planned to give, but just kind of got away from you, please consider, pray about. If you already have and you'd like to give a few more, please pray about. But we're really hoping we can get that target. Like I said, from our side, we're going to try and do some deals and some bargains and see if we can get that down a little bit. But for now, we've just got a target we're aiming at, and that's as best we can go. So please consider. We're not far off, but we need a few more to go. So please come and see me, or there's a form to give to generously. So appreciate it. Thanks heaps.
Thanks, Pete. Now, last week, Caleb shared a sermon called Wise Up, and it's part of a new series that we're running here over the next 4 or 5 weeks in total, called Living in Babylon. And he spoke about Daniel and the need for spiritual wisdom to be able to live a godly lifestyle in a non-godly culture. And today is our second session, and Andrew is going to be sharing about Speak Up. So will you please welcome Andrew?
Hello. Oh, look at that. Oh. Yes, so Caleb last week spoke about... Sorry, distracted by chairs moving up the back. It's that one I want to turn on, yes. Spoke about the need to speak up. It made me think about something that happened several careers ago for me. When you get to my age, you don't think in terms of years, you think in terms of careers. Because the numbers are too big when you think of years. Several careers ago, I was working for a very prominent retailer here in Australia, in the women's fashion area. I know, you look at me now and go, really, what have you forgotten? And as part of the process of what we went through each year in terms of developing the ranges, we had a presentation from the fashion office, as we called it, which was a team of people who kept their fingers on the pulse of the fashion trends and everything that were going on at the time. So we went down and we had this presentation, and one of the themes that they put through was, when would this have been? It would have been about the turn of the millennium. So a little while ago. And one of the themes was really Gothic inspired. So they were talking about, producing items that had all these, putting it bluntly, really satanic symbolism on the back of them and stuff like that. And I'm just sitting there, my spirit's sitting there going, this is just really, it doesn't sit well with me. And I thought, I can't go to my boss and go, oh, that's satanic, we shouldn't do that. Because she would have gone, yeah, Andrew, you're just being a religious nutjob again. So I thought, how do I translate this into the language of the people I'm trying to talk to? And that's the key to the speaking up bit. The speaking up bit isn't just about talking, about saying what you've got in your head. And this sort of relates to my message today as well. It's not about just blurting things out and making a stand without translating it so the people you're trying to influence can actually understand what you're talking about. Because if you just blurt it out, they're going to write you off. You're not going to get the message across. But if you translate it into language that they understand, then you've got an opportunity to actually get them to stop and think about what's happening. Really, really simply, retailers only understand one language, and that's the language of sales. So I went into my boss after the presentation. I said, hey, her name was Jasmine, and she was a princess. I said, hey, Jasmine, can I just have a quick word with you about the presentation? She's gone, sure, because it was a bit weird because it didn't sort of relate directly to my role. And I said, I'm really concerned about the message we're sending to our customers. She goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, this particular story that the fashion officer presented, I think is actually sending a message to our customers that we support the occult. She's gone, really? And so I started explaining to her what all the symbolism meant. She goes, are our customers going to understand that? I said, enough of them. She goes, okay. And I said, yeah. And I said, leave it with you. Ultimately, your decision. End of the day, we didn't run with it. And you sit there and go, okay, well, thank you, God, for allowing me to be able to speak in and do that rather than having something like that coming out. So I thought that was just something that was prompted by when Caleb was talking last week about the whole need to speak up, is the importance of when we speak up, speaking up in a language that the people understand. See, when you think about Daniel and his 3 friends had been trained in what? The literature and culture and language of Babylon. So he didn't speak to the king in Hebrew, even though that was his mother tongue. He spoke to them probably in Aramaic. And I'll talk about that. That'll be significant a little bit later. So we need to learn that. We need to recognise the language that we need to talk in. Cool. A couple of other things. Overwhelmingly, the message of the book of Daniel, and as we're going through the reading plan of Daniel, it's really easy for us to think of it as a prophetic book because it's got a lot of prophecy in it. It's got a lot of stuff about the future, or the future from Daniel's perspective. Interestingly, in the Jewish scriptures, the book of Daniel is not included in the prophetic books. It's included in the writings, which includes Psalms, Proverbs, Lamentations. So the way that our Bibles are organised groups it with the prophetic stuff. Jewish scriptures, where it was originally found, don't. They don't see it as a prophetic book. They see it as an account of the life of Daniel. It's not about God dealing with his people. It's about God working through one man in exactly the same way as the book of Esther. So need to keep that in mind. But the overwhelming message of the book of Daniel is simply this: hope. No, one of the songs that Mark and the team led us through. No, songs of what? Songs of hope. The Apostle Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, instructs his readers to always be ready to give an explanation for the hope that they have within them. See, if we live with a life of hope, if we live with hope governing what we do, how we speak, how we respond to situations, that is going to make people curious. Because we are living in a world now where hope is an exceptionally rare commodity. People are without hope. They're not hopeless, they're without hope. We have that opportunity to speak hope, to live a life that reflects that hope, and as a result of that, initiate discussions with people that go, things that make you go, For all the young people there, they're sitting there, what is he referring to? So important to recognise that. Okay. We will face situations where we have to choose whether we'll speak God's words or our own. Exactly the situation that I was talking about earlier. I had a situation where I could have gone out and just said what I wanted, or I could have gone, no, God, how do you want this presented? I could have said nothing. And that's always our choice. When we're faced with situations, we are faced with a choice where we can say nothing, we can say what we think we should say, or we can say what God wants us to say. Choose door C. Option 3. If you're doing a multiple choice, always answer C if you don't know. So it's important to recognise that. The next little bit of my message this morning, and I make no apologies for this because we're all trying to read through the reading plan of Daniel, and we had a discussion about the reading plan at our life group on Wednesday night, and there was a bit of like, why have there been chapters of Revelation thrown into the mix? That's just confusing. Well, so what I'm going to do now, to help with the reading plan, to help with understanding not only Caleb's message last week, my message today, but the next 3 messages that follow on from that, is a bit of an information dump. Now, remember, these messages are recorded. Can I make a suggestion? You may want to go over the information dump part again. Either that or you've got to be really, really good at taking notes. And I don't see a lot of pens and paper out, so lots of phones. Okay, things to consider when we're looking at the book of Daniel. The language. And you might say, this is weird. So the language of God's people. Chapters 2 to 7 are written in a different language. They're written in Aramaic, a related language. The Hebrews could understand it because it's sort of like a cousin language. And if you think about the New Testament, Jesus, in all his speaking in the New Testament, was probably speaking Aramaic. Just, an aside for you, Jesus probably spoke 3 languages. He would have spoken Hebrew, he would have spoken Aramaic, he would have spoken Greek. For a bunch of different reasons. But Aramaic was the common language of Babylon. The official language of Babylon, the legal language, if you like, was Akkadian. But the common language of the people of Babylon was Aramaic. So chapters 2 to 7 are written in a language that those people could understand. So you sit there and go, no. And this sort of gives you a little bit of insight of the challenges I have when I read the Bible. My brain's going, why? Why have 2 different languages in the one book? A couple of possibilities. One, some of them were a later insertion. Some parts of either the middle bit or the end bits were a later insertion, or it could be it was actually designed for different audiences. So chapter 1, chapters 8 to 12, designed to be read by God's people. Chapters 2 to 7, designed to be read by everyone. So that's the language side of it. I feel like going, any questions? Or more likely, what questions do you have? There's an enormous amount of repetition in the book. Chapter 2, what I'm going to talk about a little bit later, the king has a dream about 4 kingdoms. Chapter 3, very simple message. Big statue gets built. Everybody's instructed, bow down to the statue or die. The 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, or Shananiah, Mishael and Azariah, are thrown into a furnace and come out with not even the smell of smoke on them. Chapter 4, God deals with an arrogant and prideful king. You sit there and go, I don't see any repetition in there, Andrew. Chapter 5, God deals with another arrogant and prideful king. You start to see the repetition. Chapter 6, and this is what Mark spoke about earlier. No, let's set Daniel up because we're jealous of him. And I'm going to get distracted here. I do not understand why they were jealous of them. He had saved their lives. He was the reason they weren't dead. But they still wanted to undermine him. Not too sure that expresses gratitude, but It's probably a reflection of the sort of society we live in now. You can do wonderful things for people, but they still get jealous. And so, no, the edict was given, the law was put in place. Don't bow down. If you do, you'll die. So, bit of a mirror image of that. What happens? Daniel gets thrown into a lion's den, which we have trouble visualising, but it would have been a big hole in the ground with lions at the bottom of it and a big stone over the top of it so you can't climb out. So he's down there. This is preempting what we'll talk about in 3 weeks' time. He's down there and gets thrown in there, and the king comes the following day and, "Hey Daniel, you still okay? Has your God preserved your life?" Daniel, "Yeah, all cool, bro." And the king gets him lifted out of the lion's den, and then the people who tried to undermine Daniel get thrown in there, and before they'd even hit the ground, they'd been eaten. So the lions were clearly hungry. So you've got that repetition. And then chapter 7, Daniel has a dream about 4 kingdoms. So can you see the repetition here? So it goes chapter 2 and chapter 7 pair up with each other. Chapter 3 and chapter 6 pair up with each other. Chapter 4 and 5 pair up with each other. If you want the technical term, it's a chiasm. All of our old discipleship students are sitting there twitching now. So it's very, very structured. But what it does mean is that we can look at chapter 7 to help us understand chapter 2. We can look at chapter 6 to help us understand chapter 3 and vice versa. And you can look at 4 and 5 to understand each other. It's not just a case of simply reading through it. It is highly structured. And then chapters 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12 really are an expansion of chapter 2 and chapter 7. So chapter 7 provides a link between what's gone on before and the prophecies that we see in chapters 8 through to 12. So again, trying to understand chapter 2, trying to understand chapter 7, we get some unpacking of that in chapters 8 to 12. Does that make sense? Now, chapters 8 to 12, the other thing to realise, they're not chronological. If you read the start of each verse, the start of each chapter, it says, at this particular point in time, and you look at it and it goes, well, that's sort of chapter 2. That bit there is sort of chapter 3. So it's like flashbacks. And so you sit there and go, okay, I can't read this as start at chapter 1, read through to chapter 12, and it's a straight line in terms of time. It's not. It jumps around. So it's important to recognise that. Otherwise, we finish up thinking that things are happening after other things when they're not. So, all right, why does this matter? Because it helps us understand what the message of the book is about. Why it brings hope. Why does it bring hope? Because when you know what's happening at the end, you've got a reason to hang on. You can put up with a lot if you know what the future is going to bring. We are a people, at the end of the day, we are a people of hope. And why are we a people of hope? Because we know what God is going to do. We've read the last chapter. We understand how it ends up. How is it expressed in Scripture? And this sort of helps understand why we look at the book of Revelation as well, is the second part, chapters 8 through to 12 of Daniel and the book of Revelation are the same style of literature. Technically, it's called apocalyptic. An apocalypse or apocalypto comes from the Greek word. It literally means to take the lid off and find out what's inside. So, no, open it up. Oh, that's what's in there. And that's sort of the way it is. Now, how to understand the style of apocalyptic literature? As for those of you that have tried to read the book of Revelation, for those of you that have tried to understand chapters 8 through to 12 of Daniel, you sit there and go, this is just, what was he smoking? It's like this guy, he's either smoking something or he's got some really good mushrooms or something. He is tripping because this is just weird. Okay, and this might sound random, and I'm really glad Philip's not here. How many of you have never seen a Marvel movie? Okay, there's a few of you. Okay, how many of you have seen lots of Marvel movies? Okay, for those of you that just put your hand up, how would you explain the plot of a Marvel movie to somebody who has never seen any Marvel movies? No, you're trying to explain, the last two Avengers movies, Endgame and whatever the other one. Sorry? Infinity Wars, thank you, Mark. This is where I need Philip. So trying to explain the plot of Infinity Wars and Endgame to somebody who has never seen a Marvel movie? Okay, that's apocalyptic literature. No, you sit there and go, sorry, unless you've seen it, you can't understand it. We read it, we don't understand it because it's written in a style that we don't have the necessary reference points to. So we've got to tread very, very carefully when we're reading it because we don't get it. There's a young Australian scholar who did his PhD thesis. I think he used to be at Alpha Crucis College. He's now, I think, based over in the UK. He did his PhD thesis on the book of Revelation and made a really, really strong case that it's essentially a script for a play. So it's not actually meant to be read, it's meant to be read out with different actors reading the different parts. And you think about it, book of Revelation is full of bits that just sound like the narrator. Meanwhile, and that helps us understand it. It helps us get our head around that. But no, for those Marvel nerds in the audience, think about, okay, I'm reading this. Think about, okay, I'm trying to explain Infinity Wars to somebody who's never seen a Marvel movie. Hey, if you want to find out how hard that is, find someone who put their hand up and said, I've never seen a Marvel movie, and then try and explain it to them. That's the important part of apocalyptic and why we've included Revelation, some chapters out of Revelation in the Daniel reading plan. Because you sit there and you look at it, the imagery that's used in Daniel and the imagery that is used in the book of Revelation, very, very similar. There's animals and angels and beasts and oceans and all that sort of stuff. None of which should be taken literally. They're all figurative. That's the whole thing with apocalyptic literature. It's not talking about literal things, it is talking in symbolism. It's like C.S. Lewis when he wrote the Narnia Chronicles, because he wanted to get the gospel message and the concepts of God across to children. He used imagery, he used metaphor, he used stuff that allowed him to get the message across. Without that, otherwise, if you take the Narnia Chronicles literally, we're all lion worshippers. You know? And there you go. We're reinforcing it. We've got a picture of a lion on our slides. Clearly, we're a lion cult. No, it's a metaphor. Jesus is described as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Lots and lots of things there. So anyway, I digress. Talked about that. The themes of the book of Daniel. Overarching theme, remember this? Overarching theme is one of hope. There's a need for wisdom. Caleb talked about that last week. A wisdom that comes where? From God. Not an earthly wisdom, but a wisdom that comes from God. There's a need for obedience that comes from trusting God. There's a need for courage that comes from understanding God's character. The need to recognise God's sovereignty, and that's a fairly strong theme in the book as well. You might be king, but hey, God is God. Interestingly, book of Jeremiah, lots of things are interesting. I get excited about interesting stuff. Book of Jeremiah, King Nebuchadnezzar is described as God's servant. God describes him as my servant Nebuchadnezzar. Pagan king, taking God's people off into exile, described as my servant by God. Look it up. Twice in the book of Jeremiah. Nebuchadnezzar is also described as the King of Kings, which is an interesting title to give him. So there's a need to recognise God's sovereignty. There's a need to be ready at all times that comes from walking with God. And there's a need for hope that comes from knowing the future that God has planned. Okay. Hope that all makes sense. That's the information dump. You can all now go, I think I'll check out the video again later. Maybe twice. So, let's have a look at and unpack. With all that in mind, let's unpack chapter 2. Start at chapter 2, I think, is the longest chapter in Daniel. Start of the chapter, follows on from chapter 1 and the fact that the four young men have been appointed to positions of influence within the kingdom of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And I suspect that King Nebuchadnezzar had some trust issues. Now, I don't know about you, but when you work in Babylon, fair chance there's going to be trust issues. Anybody sort of experienced that at work? Bosses that like to micromanage because they don't trust that you're going to do it properly or the way that they need it to be done. King Nebuchadnezzar, I suspect, had some trust issues. As a result of that, he'd had a dream. He wanted the dream interpreted. So, because of his trust issues, he's gone to the wise men. For wise men, read sorcerers, enchanters, astrologers, practitioners of the magic arts. For the Marvel nerds, Sorcerer Supreme. And said, I'm not going to tell you my dream. I want you to tell me what I dreamt and then interpret it for me. That way I know that it's a proper interpretation, not stuff you're making up along the way. And the wise men have gone, very respectfully, Your Majesty, you're a nut job. They didn't use those words, but that's essentially what they were saying. It's like, no king anywhere ever has asked this of their wise men. No. What kings would do, and we see an example of this in Genesis, where Pharaoh goes to his wise men. Hey, I had this really weird dream about 7 cows being eaten by 7 other cows, and then 7 heads of wheat, 7 ears of wheat being eaten by 7 other ears of wheat. What does it mean? And their wise men have gone, I don't know, beats me. And then one of the servants of the Pharaoh's gone, oh, there was actually a young guy when I was in prison who actually interpreted very accurately the dreams that me and the baker had. Get him here. And Dave and Joseph, the young man in that story, made a statement saying, no. And this was the humility that had grown through lots of trial in Joseph. Joseph was a very arrogant young man, had a few crises in his life that led to a bit of humility being developed, and was able to say, no, I can't interpret anything, Pharaoh, but the God that I serve can. And you'll find that in Genesis chapter 41, verse 16. But our story is with Daniel going to King Nebuchadnezzar, God's servant, King of Kings, and said, Daniel replied, there are no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or fortune tellers who can reveal the king's secret. So he's basically reinforcing the message that the wise man had given, saying, you're asking something that nobody can do. But, no, God's but. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. And he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the future. Now I will tell you your dream and the visions you saw as you lay on your bed. So Daniel has gone, you've asked for the impossible. The only person that can answer that impossible is God. But God's given me the answer. I can now share it with you. Overwhelmingly, what comes through that statement is respect. Daniel's respect for Nebuchadnezzar. Not just because Nebuchadnezzar could snuff out his life like that, because he recognised how God was using the king. We don't always do that with people in political leadership. We don't necessarily show them that level of respect. So, he explains that he shares what the dream was. In your vision, Your Majesty, you saw standing before you a huge shining statue of a man. It was a frightening sight. Not too sure how a statue can be frightening unless it's that 5-foot hand monstrosity that they're shifting out of Wellington. That's a scary looking statue. Check it out. New Zealand hand statue. Google it. It's potentially coming to Melbourne. It's like a big hand, fingers do your walking thing with a face on the front of it that looks really serious. Anyway. It was a frightening sight. Now that statue will come back and be revisited next week. Won't it, Leanne? Leanne's preaching next week. And there's a statue that's part of the story there. So you see this statue, bit of a MacGuffin. For those of you that know what a MacGuffin is, it's an object that continues through a movie or book that helps move the plot forward. Add it to your list of useless words shared by Pastor Andrew. In your vision, you said, the head of the statue was made of fine gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron. And its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. Okay. So that was the dream. That was the dream that he wasn't prepared to share with the wise men. That was the dream. Now, there was a bit after the dream, and I'm going to hold that off to the end, because that's the hope bit. Now we'll tell the king what it means. Your Majesty, you are the greatest of kings. The God of heaven has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and honour. He has made you the ruler over all the inhabited world and has put even the wild animals and birds under your control. You are the head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar then goes on in the next chapter to go, I'm going to be more than the head of gold, I'm going to be the whole blinking statue. Makes a giant gold statue of himself. After your kingdom comes to an end, another kingdom, inferior to yours, will rise to take your place. After that kingdom has fallen, yet a third kingdom, represented by bronze, will rise to rule the world. Following that kingdom, there'll be a fourth one, as strong as iron. That kingdom will smash and crush all previous empires, just as iron smashes and crushes everything it strikes. The feet and toes you saw were a combination of iron and baked clay, showing that this kingdom will be divided. Like iron mixed with clay, it will have some of the strength of iron, but while some parts will be as strong as iron, other parts will be as weak as clay. Okay. The head. Clearly, in the interpretation that Daniel gives, the head is Babylon, the empire of the Babylonians. The kingdom that followed the Babylonians was the Medes and Persians. The Medo-Persian Empire. For those of you that have seen the movie 300, understand who the Persians were and what they were like. They were the kingdom that took over from the Babylonians. That kingdom was conquered by another one, led by a young man called Alexander. Referred to as the Greek Empire. He's Macedonian. That's led to thousands of years of conflict about Greece and Macedonia. But never mind. That there. One of the later chapters, can't remember which one it is, talks about the fact that that empire will be split into four. Which is exactly what happened when Alexander died suddenly. His kingdom wasn't inherited by a son, he didn't have any. But it was split amongst his four generals. One of whom was Ptolemy, took over Egypt and the area of Israel, and that's Herod and the ones that we see in the New Testament are all descendants of that empire. That then gets followed by a fourth empire. No, not at the end of the world. The fourth empire, really clearly, the Romans. Strong as iron. Some top-looking blokes there, aren't there? Don't think the second one was particularly short of a good feed. But they are the four empires. They are the four empires that the statue represents. Now, what happened to the Roman Empire? Split in two, like two legs. Eastern Roman Empire, Western Roman Empire. Western Roman Empire basically split into a whole bunch of kingdoms, reflected now in Europe. Eastern Roman Empire, same thing. Bunch of different countries spread across the Middle East and countries like Georgia and that used to be part of the Soviet Union. So there was another bit. This is Daniel explaining the dream, going back to that. As you watched, so as he was having his vision, he's just seen the four kingdoms represented by the statue. As he watched, a rock was cut from a mountain, but not by human hands. It struck the feet of iron and clay, smashing them to bits. The whole statue was crushed into small pieces of iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold. Then the wind blew them away without a trace, like chaff on a threshing floor. But the rock that knocked the statue down became a great mountain that covered the whole earth. So that was the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had. How did Daniel interpret that? During the reign of those kings, so those kings that were around after the Roman Empire, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed or conquered. This is reflected in some of the later stuff in chapters 8 to 12 as well. It will crush all these kingdoms into nothingness, and it will stand forever. That is the meaning of the rock cut from the mountain, though not by human hands, that crushed to pieces the statue of iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold. The great God was showing the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true, and its meaning is certain. Daniel had hope because he could see the rock that was carved from the mountain, and the mountain filled the whole earth. The hope that we have is that that rock is Christ, and the mountain that grew from Christ is his church. And that church will grow until it fills the whole earth. I am not a big fan of the view, and others, I'm quite happy to have discussions with people afterwards about this. I'm not a big fan of the view that says the world is going to hell in a handbasket and Jesus is going to come and rescue people, rescue his church and whisk them away because they can't cope with what's coming. I'm more of a fan of the view that we are part of the mountain that will fill the whole earth. And as a result of that, we have hope for our future. We have hope for the impact that we can make on the whole earth. We have hope because we know that what we are part of is what will win, what will finish the story in victory. Christ won the victory. He has left it to his church to execute that victory on earth. It's a view of hope, not a view of needing to be rescued because we're weak and that our God is weak. Daniel had patience. He was able to endure persecution, trouble, because he had a view of the future. He had seen through God what was to come, and therefore he had perspective. We're playing the long game, folks. We're not trying to change the world in an instant. That's God's job at the very, very end, where everything will change in the twinkling of an eye. We need to play the long game. I'm going to share a bit of a personal story here as I wrap up. I've been a part of the Sky Cricket Club for 21 years now as a player, before that as a parent of a kid that was playing. Over that time, I've just tried to live a life of representing Christ. It is currently the most multicultural club in the Mornington Peninsula Cricket Association. About a quarter of our players are Muslims. I get the joy of captaining them, a bunch of them, on a Saturday. We played a game yesterday. I'm captain of the third 11. Got a call yesterday. Somebody had pulled out of our second 11 game, and I got to play in the second. Lovely drive down to Tutgarook on a long weekend. And as a result of that, playing that 200th game, I put a little bit of a post up. The club also put a couple of posts up. No, congratulations on playing your 200th game. And the number of comments in those threads that have been about the impact that I have had on people, the inspiration I've provided, blew me away, humbled me. Players that I haven't played cricket with for almost 20 years in some cases, making comments. See, we don't know the impact that we have simply by being a person of hope. And as we finish up today, I'd just like everyone to reflect on, ask yourself the question, how is my life demonstrating the hope that I have? And if it's not, why not? Because we know we win. There is no reason for us not to be a person of hope, unless we're focusing so much on the Babylon that we live in that we've lost sight of the God that we serve. Thank you.
Let's just close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are a God of hope and that you give us great hope, and that your plans and purposes for us are for hope and an incredible future. And we ask too that you would increase in us, that your light in us would increase, that others, when they see us, when they interact with us, when they hear our words, that they would see Jesus, they would hear Jesus, and that they would be curious to discover Jesus for themselves. So we thank you, and we thank you that when we pray to you, you hear us and you respond. And may we, as we leave this place, may we be people of great hope, great victory, ones who would persevere and not give up because of who lives in our lives, because of who we place our trust in. In Jesus' name, amen. I really appreciated what you had to share today, Cav. You know, too often we can read the Bible or we can not read the Bible because it's just too hard. You know, we put it in the too hard basket. But it's so important that we actually take the time to read and to understand. And it was great the way you just unpacked, you know, the correlation between the now, the future, Daniel's now, Daniel's future. So, you know, thank you for that. So we're going to just officially close our service now. If you would like prayer for anything, please come out the front, because one of our prayer team would love to just stand with you. It could be an area that you might need more hope for the future, that you're facing a situation. Please come and use this opportunity. If you're interested in the carpet squares or in being part of our Christmas baskets, don't forget to go to the welcome desk. Make sure you grab a coffee, grab your kids, and say hello to someone new, and we'll hope to see you back next week. Thank you.